Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And we want to
abolish the monarchy.
How was that?
I don't know. We need to try something new. We are getting a lot of reviews and messages and stuff from people who think we're doing a royal fan podcast, and every week we get like an essay about the problems people had with it. So I don't know, we'll maybe try it, but maybe I don't like it, I don't know. But moving on to the subject of the episode, which is that we're not the only people who want to cut ties with the monarchy. This week we had some very exciting news from Barbados.
Yeah, so Barbados has announced its intention to remove the Queen as head of state and become a republic next year. There's a speech that was written by the Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, and read by the Governor-General of Barbados, Sandra Mason. And in it they said that Barbados wants full sovereignty by the time it celebrates its 55th anniversary of independence from the UK in November 2021.
The speech also quoted Barbados' first Prime Minister, Errol Barrow, who had warned against loitering on colonial premises.
Ooh.
Which is such a good line.
Yeah.
But the Governor-General said,
"The time has come to fully leave our colonial past behind. Barbadians want a Barbadian head of state. This is the ultimate statement of confidence in who we are and what we are capable of achieving. Hence, Barbados will take the next logical step towards full sovereignty and become a republic by the time we celebrate our 55th anniversary of independence."
I was so happy.
yeah, we were like cheering, we were like punching the air. I was so excited to see this. We heard that Buckingham Palace have said that this plan to remove the Queen as the Barbadian head of state is a matter for the government and people of Barbados.
Barbados is going to join Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica and Guyana if it proceeds with this plan to become a republic. They still remain members of the Commonwealth, though.
And Jamaica's Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, has also said it is a priority of his government, but has yet to achieve it. But, you know, we can hope.
Yeah.
And according to the Telegraph, if Barbados does remove the Queen as head of state, this would take the number of the Queen's realms as constitutional monarch down to 15.
I just think no one should have realms in this day and age. But yeah, included in that 15 is Australia, Canada and the Bahamas.
Among others. But I'm really hoping this is the start of like a larger knock-on effect. Like, I was reading the Telegraph's royal correspondent Camilla Tominey wrote about how when Charles becomes king, there may be more interest in other countries following Barbados in doing this. And she wrote that with the sovereign no longer undertaking long-haul travel and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex now out of the picture, never has there been more pressure on Prince Charles, the Duchess of Cornwall and the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge to fly the flag for Queen and country abroad. But like, when I was reading this, I was thinking like, well, Charles is so unpopular compared to the Queen, and Camilla hates flying, as we know, and Will and Kate don't love working.
No.
So really, I think it's only a matter of time before these remaining realms dump the monarchy too.
We can but hope.
Very exciting. It was also announced this week that the Queen has ordered that Harvey Weinstein be stripped of his CBE, an honour he was awarded in 2004. CBE is like the low-level one.
Yeah. It's really rare for official honours to be removed, though it is possible apparently when the recipient has brought the honours system into disrepute. I mean, given, like, I don't think that they took away Jimmy Savile's honours after everything that came out with him.
Did that come out before he died?
No.
Okay, because they explained that by saying that you no longer hold the honour after your death.
Oh.
So that's how they got around the Jimmy Savile thing.
Right.
But anyway, this is all decided by what's called the Honours Forfeiture Committee, which is independent from the government. And they advise the Queen, and then she approves their decisions. But I was reading this piece in the BBC about like why this took so long, because, you know, we've been hearing stuff about Harvey Weinstein since 2017, and he was sentenced in February of this year.
Yeah.
But according to the BBC, the committee's publicly published criteria for rescinding an honour includes cases where an individual has been convicted of a criminal offence and sentenced to more than 3 months in prison. That means that when criminal charges or a trial are likely or pending, the committee is reluctant to take action until that process is complete, regardless of how overwhelming the evidence or public opinion may be. But like, even still, you know, that's 6 months.
Yeah.
That's something to do it. And there's no word yet on Prince Andrew's various honorary appointments and HRH title or anything like that. He's still holding on to all those.
I guess they're kind of slightly explaining that by talking about how you have to be convicted before they start the process.
What was Prince Harry convicted of when he was stripped of his military appointments?
Well, yeah. The Mirror reported that there's an increased pressure on Andrew to speak to the FBI about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein following the cooperation of Epstein's chef, Adam Perry Lang, who flew on his private jet with Andrew twice in 1999 and 2000.
Sources told the Mirror that this chef has been or will be quizzed about his time with Andrew, and that US prosecutors have grown increasingly annoyed at Andrew stonewalling them. The source said, "The gloves are firmly off. Perry Lang holds information on what took place. They will get as much detail as possible that will help shape any interview they may one day have with the Duke."
Wow.
What does this chef know?
Oh my god. He probably has like loads of information about how much ketchup Andrew uses on his food and all that kind of like his horrible taste.
But in all seriousness, every story we've heard about what went on this jet has been
grim,
harrowing. So I am very interested in if anything comes out of this. But the big Prince Andrew update this week is that he will reportedly be airbrushed out of his father Prince Philip's 100th birthday celebrations next June.
Yeah, according to The Sun, Andrew won't be invited to any of the major celebrations, and the organisers have been told to avoid using pictures of him in a big photo exhibition that they're doing for Philip.
And Philip's team has also vetoed Andrew from writing the introduction to the programme for this exhibition. Why on earth you would have Andrew on the shortlist to do this in the first place is beyond me.
Even if there was none of this Epstein stuff, like that statement that he reportedly wrote that didn't make any sense at all, like I don't think he's a natural born writer.
An insider told The Sun, "There is a warning from up high to play down Andrew. He will be included as little as possible. It's not whitewashing history because you can't leave him out entirely, but it will not make a big deal of his relationship with the Duke of Edinburgh over the years. This is obviously proving difficult because he is his son and it's playing down his role in the family."
I was so interested in for what from up high means, because does that mean higher than Philip? Is that the Queen?
I have no idea. I do think, though, the way they're talking about all of this is very much about what the public sees.
Yeah.
And it's nothing to do with their actual relationships or feelings. It's just a way of tempering all this to avoid a public outrage or whatever. They're really not fussed about any of the allegations about Andrew personally.
Oh yeah, like if they could have him featured prominently, they absolutely would.
This has been described by a royal expert, Nigel Cawthorne, as the toughest decision of Philip's life. Which really just makes you think what a charmed life this man has had.
Not to be photographed with his very dodgy son at like his official birthday engagements. Yeah, I have no sympathy, even though it does seem like Phil has had a pretty tough week all told. Because in addition to having to make this incredibly tough decision about Andrew, he was denied the chance to get away from the Queen for the first time since March.
I was fascinated by this. This was first reported in The Sun, because we had talked before about how Buckingham Palace had made a statement about how the Queen and Prince Philip would be leaving Balmoral and they would be going to Sandringham for some private time before the Queen returned to Windsor, what sounded like returning alone. But The Sun reports that they will actually both be heading to Windsor rather than him being allowed to stay at Wood Farm in Sandringham.
So a source said Philip didn't want to go to Balmoral and doesn't want to go to Windsor, but there's not enough staff to make two bubbles, so he is being made to go. it makes far more sense to keep them together. I was obsessed with this quote from a source. It sounds like he's being a total nightmare.
So bratty, he doesn't want to go to Windsor. The Sun noted, the Queen and Duke spent 6 months together due to lockdown, one of the longest periods during their 72-year marriage. And they have privately vowed to try and spend more time together. This is baffling to me. 6 months is the longest time they've spent together in their marriage.
It's madness.
And I mean, I know this kind of arrangement works for a lot of people, but the way that people talk about the Queen and Prince Philip's relationship is, you know, their marriage goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way even the time they've spent together in lockdown has been like, oh, it's so nice for them to be spending all this time. Like, I was talking to my mum about it, and she was like, oh, I thought it was all quite meant to be quite cute, and they were enjoying spending time with each other. I'm like, not according to Philip now. It doesn't sound like he's interested in this vow to spend more time together anyway.
Sounds like he's itching to get back to Wood Farm.
Yeah, he's itching to get back to his chauffeur, Penny Braybun.
His lady chauffeur. We got some Cambridge sightings this week.
Yeah.
Those of us wondering where the hell Kate's been the last month. Obviously, we just had to wait till Prince Harry's birthday before she'd reappear. But I'm getting ahead of myself. On Monday, the National Portrait Gallery launched its Hold Still exhibition of 100 photographs capturing life during the pandemic, which was reportedly spearheaded by Kate, the royal patron. And if you haven't looked through these photographs, you can see them all. There's like a digital exhibition online. I know a lot of people found it very moving. There was a lot of these through the window shots of families, a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of frontline workers, people in PPE, and 2 photos referencing the Black Lives Matter movement.
You guys were particularly interested in these photos. One was taken by a father of his daughter with her mouth covered, and it was called I Can't Breathe. And there was another photo which was of a protester holding a sign that reads, Be on the right side of history. And each photo is accompanied by some text by the photographer, and this one talked a lot about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor.
Kate really got a lot of credit for supporting Black Lives Matter with these 2 photos.
Yeah.
Which was surprising to me because when I was looking through these photos, you know, I would imagine that if you have what felt like a dozen or more of these through the window pics of families.
Yeah.
That wasn't my experience of the pandemic as much as the protests.
Yeah, that was such a huge part of our quarantine experience, not only from the protests that we went to, but hearing about them all around the world.
I do think we should avoid giving Kate sole credit in this, because the judging panel also included Lem Sissay, an author and broadcaster, the British Pakistani photographer Mariam Wahid, Ruth May, the Chief Nursing Officer for England, and the National Portrait Gallery's director Nicholas Cullinan.
Yeah, so like a pretty diverse panel, and it would be very surprising if you didn't have any photos in here that showed the Black Lives Matter movement.
It did feel slight to me, but Kate did get a special shout out from the Queen, who released a special statement in support of Kate and this project, which seemed, you know, on one hand it was like, well, this is a very nice project. It reflects very well on the royal family that they were involved with it, and it's nice of the Queen to be supporting a member of her family in their work. It does definitely show up how false the claims were that the Queen could never have shown any support for Meghan's work.
Yeah.
You know, we never saw anything like this with the Together cookbook for the Hub Community Kitchen or the Smart Tech collection, or indeed anything at all that Meghan did. So it just, when people say, well, what could the Queen have done? She doesn't do that.
Yeah.
She does do that.
We were starting to get pretty suspicious at Kate's absence, wondering why she hadn't actually done anything to promote the exhibition once it went live. As a royal patron of the National Portrait Gallery, her job is basically to bring attention to their endeavours. Like, we did find out earlier this year that royal patrons don't necessarily bring any extra financial benefits to the causes and organisations that they work with, so they are there to kind of draw focus. And I was really surprised that Kate didn't do some kind of new appearance or record some kind of message on Monday when it went live.
Yeah, and we were then surprised to see the following day she resurfaced at last, and so close to where we live. She visited the Bagel Bake Shop on Brick Lane, as well as the East London Mosque and the London Muslim Centre in Shadwell, where she talked to members of the community that had supported one another through food donations and deliveries during the pandemic. They also went to a job centre, which I feel like would boil my blood if I had lost my job in coronavirus and these two layabouts showed up and asked me how easy it was to get universal credit.
Yeah, like, absolutely no clue what these people are going through at all. Like, the interactions just seemed so, like, false or something.
I did enjoy the appearance at the bagel shop.
Where they were moving dough about.
Where they were getting down to business. I did think they should have washed their hands, though, instead of just using hand sanitizer. You know, just if you're going to be touching raw dough, you don't want the alcohol of the hand sanitizer. Anyway, that's a minor quibble.
People did want Kate to wear a hairnet. I don't think people were as concerned about Will, but there were some kind of safety concerns that people were bringing up online.
I was very amused by the Instagram coverage of this appearance. The social media team seemed to have learned from the watermelon sugar incident. And this time when they put the reel together, they chose the song Send Me On My Way by Rusted Root, which you may recognise from the films Matilda or Ice Age.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it.
The most banal, family-friendly, uncontroversial song you could think of. It really cracked me up.
Yeah, that was really funny. What I also thought was really funny / shady was the timing of this appearance.
Oh my god.
We kind of had to double check because we thought this can't be right. But it was Harry's birthday that they did this appearance on. The last time Kate did a public appearance was Meghan's birthday.
So funny.
Literally haven't seen her in between. We get posts like an email has been sent and it's a screenshot of a mobile, and then as soon as it's a birthday, out she comes.
There is more to discuss regarding the birthday though, because there was a little bit of controversy over the images selected by each of the royal accounts to mark Prince Harry's birthday. And before Kate and Will headed out to the job centre, Jesus Christ, they posted a photo of Harry, Will and Kate racing on a running track at London Olympic Park in 2017. It
was part of a heads together team training kind of thing ahead of the London Marathon there.
And we should note as well that, like, the Queen, the royal family Instagram also shared a picture that was just Harry talking to the Queen, and Clarence House shared a picture of Harry talking to Charles. But this one, the Cambridge's one, really struck people for a number of reasons. Most obviously because it was Kate, Will, Harry, and no Meghan.
Yeah. I mean, it really seemed to be harking back to like a happier time was kind of the vibe that I got from it.
I mean, if you're someone who hates Meghan, as many of the commenters were and pointed out, like, how lovely it was before it all fell apart.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessary for them to include Meghan in a photo for Harry's birthday, obviously. As long as Harry's in it, they're kind of doing their job. And I don't think it would have been an issue if they had just posted a nice picture of Harry, or even a picture of Harry and Will. But because it was the three of them pre-Meghan, it just seemed like after Harry leaving the country because he felt bullied out or not accepted by his family, and especially because of their treatment, allegedly, of his wife, to not take that on board and maybe extend an olive branch in the form of like a picture of all four of them together seemed very odd to me.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't pick up on that when I first saw it. I was just like, oh, that's a funny photo. And it wasn't until I talked to you about it that I thought, oh, maybe there is something shady going on here. We did ask our Instagram followers, and it was split kind of down the middle. But I guess seeing how the response to it really blew up, that underlined to me that even if this wasn't purposeful, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
Because all of the coverage was Meghan left out of the picture. Fans wonder where Meghan is in Harry's birthday picture. It was covered in a lot of the media just for that reason. I think as well, the thing that stood out looking at it, even in spite of Meghan not being in it, is that Harry is literally running away from them in this picture.
Yeah. I thought it was funny because he's winning the race as well.
Yeah.
And like, on one hand, it was kind of funny because he's winning, but then also it made me think that, like, Will is kind of only really happy to let these small victories go, like winning a little practice race. He doesn't seem to like it when, say, Harry and Meghan are a lot more popular or successful than him. So the competition is real.
There was also a lot of attention paid to the fact that there was an empty lane between Harry and Will and Kate, which is getting pretty deep into the weeds, I think. Yeah. But some people really went with that, including The Times, which noted that this empty lane only emphasised Meghan's absence and also how much the once close-knit group had fractured once Meghan arrived. The Times even reached out to Kensington Palace to ask them about this, and a spokeswoman said, "People are reading too much into this. It's just a nice photo." What do you think of that, Tom?
I'm basically split between whether this is hurtful or stupid. I don't think it could be like a slip to put out this photo of the three of them. You know, it seems like a deliberate thing to me. What about you?
I could believe that it was just, oh, this is a nice photo. I think it was thoughtless of them to do it that way, though. It makes me think that the Kensington Palace team are not making the smartest moves.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we talked before about the Tatler scandal around the profile of Kate and how that was blown up into a way bigger thing than it needed to be by Kensington Palace. And you just wonder the things they decide they need to really zero in on and make a statement about or whatever, compared to these things where they're like, oh, that's just a nice photo and maybe don't think about it.
Yeah, they really seem to pick and choose when to go like 110% on stuff or give things 100% of their attention.
Or it just makes me feel like they don't have a great read on what the public are paying attention to in regards to them, and that they think like any randomer is going to be really noticing like a Tatler story, whereas everyone that follows them on Instagram will be following what kind of picture they post for Harry's birthday.
But speaking of a great read, it's time for the book club segment of our show.
For this installment in our book club, we are going to be talking about Majesty, the sequel to American Royals by Catherine McGee. We previously talked about the first book earlier in our Quarantine book club. But I would warn you that we are going to be getting into a lot of detail about this book, so there'll be a lot of spoilers. If you haven't read this book, do not go any further without vigilance.
Yeah. We talked a lot about the world building in the first book, and so we probably won't go into that again now, but if you are interested in our thoughts on that, go back to the previous episode. A kind of potted history is that these books take place in an alternate reality where George Washington became the king of America rather than the first president, and his descendants have ruled ever since.
So the last book ended with the death of the current king of America, which meant that his eldest daughter, Beatrice, was primed to be queen. So we are picking up straight after, and like in the first book, Majesty goes between four characters' point of view. So first off, we've got Beatrice, who is about to become the first female monarch of America following the death of her dad. And she is engaged to Teddy, the aristocrat that featured in the first book, though she's still in love with her hunky rearguard Connor.
Oh, Connor.
As you wish, Mum. Mum. Have a good evening, Mum. Mum, you have to tuck under your jacket, Mum.
Beatrice's sister Samantha is the spare, or has been the spare up until this point, and this book kind of shows her having to move into more of a first in line to the throne kind of role.
Then you have Nina, who has recently broken up with Jefferson, Samantha's twin brother, following a romance fraught with hostility from racist tabloid coverage and Jeff's scheming ex,
Daphne, who is a minor aristocrat with her sights set on marrying into the royal family. She spent the whole of the first book trying to break up Nina and Jeff, while also dealing with her guilt over the role she played in her best friend Himari's coma.
I think we can start with Beatrice's storyline. So you may remember, if you listened to our previous episode, that we were really into her steamy romance with her bodyguard Connor in the first book, and we were really hoping that they would get to be together.
Yeah. We were listening back to like what we had predicted, and we were really hoping that she would run off with Connor. Well, I was anyway. But ultimately, she feels that her announcement to her father that she wanted to be with Connor and not Teddy is what contributed to his death. So she feels very guilty about that. And the book kind of starts with her decision to marry Teddy after all, which causes Connor to resign and leave the book until the very end of it.
We'll get into that in a moment, because we have a lot of thoughts about it.
Yeah.
But a big part of this book is the relationship between Beatrice and her villainous Chamberlain, Robert Standish, who convinces her that she needs to be married before the people of America will accept her as a queen who can actually govern. Other than that, though, we don't really get any insight into what her day-to-day working life would be like as monarch, because the whole book is basically just her planning her wedding to Teddy.
And it's so odd because I really felt like we got a small glimpse in the first book into what the king did, and it seemed we were speculating like, does he seems to be like a combination of the queen and prime minister over here, like president and monarch. And I really thought in this book we'd get further into that, because either Beatrice or I had kind of thought Samantha might become queen, but that we'd get a point of view character and get to see what this kind of hybrid role might look like. But I think we actually get less information in this book about what the monarch does than we did in the first one, which I was pretty disappointed with.
Yeah, it was strange because there doesn't appear to be a president or a prime minister or any other kind of head of state figure in this universe. I had thought, we'd hear about her having to meet with the Boris Johnson equivalent or whatever over there. But it seems like this country runs for the time of this book without any head of state.
Yeah, there's no figurehead. It seems like there is Congress that is working away, but without, like you say, like a figurehead.
Which would maybe make the people of this monarchy wonder what the point is of a monarchy at all.
Yeah, and it is a bit confusing because the book even notes that the monarch was meant to govern, not run around shaking hands like some kind of mascot for America. But we're still left wondering what that governing is.
Because it really sounds like she's a mascot for America.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about this Robert Standish character, because he is very much the sort of cartoon villain version of the men in grey suits that Princess Diana talked about. Like, there's a line where Catherine McGee says, Robert was the sort of person who said Your Majesty as if the title belonged to him, or at least as if it lent him a second-hand glamour. So really one of those courtiers that feels they're more royal than the royals.
Yeah.
And feels that he's some kind of gatekeeper for what is and isn't royal. So we hear him telling Beatrice never to ask anyone to call her by her name, and sneering and snapping at Sam about how to properly conduct herself and all this kind of stuff in a way that you would think would be quite shocking from a staff member to their boss.
And obviously he is taking advantage of the fact that Beatrice is like brand new to the role, still mourning her father, probably feels very lost. But what I found like slightly odd was that it really is just him that we see, that like she deals with and who offers this resistance to kind of what she wants to do. I would have liked if there'd been more men in grey suits, because he became quite cartoony, I thought. Like, he literally like splutters and spits when he gets caught and like has to be like forcibly removed from the palace or whatever. So I had kind of hoped that there would be maybe more of like a conspiracy rather than this guy who seems just to be quite power hungry.
Yeah, and it just really bothered me because straight away when he's introduced, you get this sense of him as being very patronizing, very rude, very unwilling to work with Beatrice, not even really respecting her. And I felt like in the first book, the arc for Beatrice was that she was building up to being more confident in herself and into asserting herself. And I guess that has been all set back by the death of her father. But it felt like we were just doing that storyline again in this one, as we were waiting for her to eventually decide she was going to sack this guy and really assume her role. But it just felt like the story of her becoming queen really was sidelined in favor of so much focus on the romance. And I love romance. I'm a big romance reader. I had been reading romances for weeks up until we started reading this one. And I just felt like it really didn't do that story justice at all.
This book in general, and we'll get onto it when we talk about the other characters, made me realise what a sheltered life I've lived as a romance reader, because I almost exclusively read romances that you have recommended to me, and I always love them. And with this, I felt let down.
But let's talk about the romance. So we've got Teddy, who in the first book, Beatrice wasn't really that fussed about. She just felt like he was the right man for the job.
Yeah.
In this book, he has quite a different personality and relationship with Beatrice, though.
Yeah, there's a lot more warmth and consideration, and I would say he does come across as like very supportive and romantic. And this is coming from someone who's a big Connor fan. But I thought he was a formidable opponent.
Yeah, I really got the impression that it was going to be like the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series. Yeah. And sorry if this is a spoiler for that series, but in the second book and film, they introduce John Ambrose, who is a very formidable contender for the romantic hero compared to Peter Kavinsky, the reigning holder of that title. And you do feel legitimately torn, and that's what makes the best of triangles so effective.
Yeah.
And I was really excited, and I remember telling you, like, when I was, 50 pages into it, like, whoa, Teddy is really shaping up to be a bit of a threat here.
Which was a surprise to me, because
I
thought he was a bit of a wet blanket.
But you had nice little romantic gestures, like when he got Beatrice that brownie from Boston or something when she was feeling very stressed. That was a nice moment. But as excited as I was about where is she going to go with this, then I felt like the conclusion of this was a real fuck you to the people who enjoyed the first book and had become very invested in the Connor and Beatrice romance. When Beatrice thinks to herself that Connor wanted to charge in like a knight in shining armour, offering to rescue her, whereas Teddy gave her the confidence to rescue herself.
I feel like in the whole of the first book we were told how sexy it was that Connor was like so protective of her, and now suddenly I was being told that I was very sexist for liking Connor.
I feel like it's such a cheat because Connor is removed from this book for almost the entire thing, so you don't get to compare her interactions with Connor and her interactions with Teddy. You just have this really blunt statement telling you, you're wrong, he's not sexy.
And we never get to see what the Connor Beatrice relationship would be like if he wasn't employed by her either. Like, I understand why he resigned at the beginning of this book, but if he had still been around and they'd been able to spend time together well, not as peers because she's the queen, but like not in a direct employer-employee situation where he's literally there to protect her, then maybe they could have investigated why the relationship wouldn't work in a more believable way.
Yeah, and as well as feeling really cheated by that, because I did get the sense that it was a bit of character assassination going on there to maneuver Beatrice and Teddy together and get Connor out of the picture. The way that they wrap up her storyline in general and how they decide that she is not going to have the wedding, that she wants to establish herself as a queen and she doesn't want her first act as queen to be getting married. That sends a bad message to the people of America. I don't know why it took her so long to get to that conclusion. But she decides that she's going to be a single queen. And the final line of the book was the real nail in the coffin for just making me feel like this book was a waste of my time. Because Beatrice's final words are, "Most of all, I'm going to be the queen." If ever there was a placeholder line, that's it.
Yeah. I felt like this whole book was about, or her whole storyline was about trying to define what the queen was, what the queen meant, what it meant to be in her position, because there had never been someone like that. And we don't get any answer to that. We just get this line at the end, which is still full of all the questions we had on page 1.
It's a total dud of a line.
And it's so disappointing because I felt like in the first book, Catherine McGee seemed so interested in finding out the answer to these kind of questions.
Yeah.
And I feel like she was like hamstrung in this novel and wasn't able or willing to really dig deep into these. I would have liked if a lot more of this book had been about Beatrice establishing herself, her establishing the right kind of team. Like, didn't Nina's mum used to work for the royals? Why didn't they, headhunt her, bring her back in, start to get, a more diverse group of people around the queen to advise her, get rid of Standish much earlier on? He could still be plotting something in the background if you want him as the villain. But, there was just so much potential that wasn't delved into at all.
Yeah, and it struck me because I don't know why I had thought this book series was going to be a trilogy, but it felt like this was the second book that would be the bridge between the first and last.
Yeah.
And instead, the whole thing was compressed into this really overstuffed, underwhelming book that just left you with more questions than answers and really made you feel cheated. Another thing that really contributed to that feeling for me was the arc for Samantha, which again seemed like a total rehash of her arc from the first book, which was all about negotiating her feelings as a spare and coming in second to Beatrice, and that's exactly what goes on in this book again, only as first in line and monarch rather than second in line and first in line. And it completely abandoned the storyline that had been set up in the first book, where Samantha had been appointed to her father's charitable organization, the Washington Trust, and that was going to be a big way for her to define her role. I don't think the Washington Trust was even mentioned in this book. No, it
wasn't. And I remember, part of the reason that I thought Samantha was going to end up on the throne is because I felt like her storyline in that first book was about her getting serious about things, and that actually she was going to realise that she enjoyed making a difference and she enjoyed having something meaningful to do, and that Beatrice was the one who wanted to, have a break or take off from this prescriptive life. But like you said, it just went for a total reset instead.
So again, we hear a lot about how the life of the spare is a job full of nothing, even though she allegedly has a job already. And it's again, at the end of the first book, she got the Washington Trust gig, and at the end of this book, she gets the royal tour. And it's just the same thing over and over again. But that means her storyline is totally preoccupied with romance. And that's not always a bad thing, but I did have a lot of issues with her new love interest, Marshall Davis, who is an heir to the Dukedom of Orange, which apparently spans most of the western seaboard and hadn't joined the United States until the 19th century.
With the introduction of Marshall, we get a bit on the history of black aristocrats and the history of slavery in this alternate universe. So Catherine McGee says, Marshall's many times great-grandfather had been born into slavery. Daniel Davis was one of the thousands of formerly enslaved people who sought their fortunes out west after abolition had set them free. When Orange revolted against Spain, he became a key figure in its war for independence. Daniel was such a popular general that when the fighting was done, the people of Orange clamoured for him to lead their new nation, and he was named King Daniel I of Orange. 20 years later, Orange gave up independence to join the United States.
Yeah, so that's like a paraphrase version of what she says in the book, but she also adds that they weren't the first black aristocrats, that Edward I had ennobled several prominent families after abolition.
And that's it. It would have been interesting to find out more about what effect having black aristocrats and ruling families would have had on the structure of racism in America, but we don't get any more on that, and there's no explanation of the role this monarchy had in slavery. It's only then referenced much later in the book when Sam, kind of out of the blue, lashes out at Robert Standish for criticising Beatrice. And she says, "What part of our legacy are you defending? The colonising? The gross human rights violations my ancestors committed in the name of expansion and progress? Slavery?"
This came totally out of the blue, because the rest of the book really seems to make a case for a monarchy as a rosy love-in between the monarch and her people. And it just hammered it home to me how disappointing and one-dimensional the characterization of Marshall is. The only times she acknowledges his race feel like almost like tokenistic, like almost empty gestures. You know, we have this moment when Samantha first asks him to fake date her, and he's the one who has to point out to her that whenever someone in the royal family dates a person of colour, things get ugly. And he says, "I'm the one who's going to take the heat for it, not you," which is something she hadn't even thought about.
Which did ring true to me. Like, obviously, these incredibly privileged white kids, it's totally understandable that they wouldn't have even thought about it from somebody else's perspective, let alone the perspective of a person of colour.
But she is ashamed for 1 second, and then he changes his mind in literally the next sentence. This very sudden, very unconvincing about face that I felt really drained that conversation of any impact it might have had, because it just doesn't feel grounded in reality.
No way. I mean, I totally agree with you. It just felt like incredibly surface level and...
like box ticking.
Yeah, box ticking, no time or care given to try and get deeper into it.
And, you know, as the book is told from the perspectives of these four women, we only ever hear about Marshall through Sam's perspective. So, you know, we don't get to hear him talking to his friends or his family or you know, any other people of colour about how he actually feels about any of this, apart from one incredibly brief encounter with Nina, who is basically a stranger to him, that pulls him aside just before the royal wedding when there's crowds everywhere to check in with him, and it just felt really insubstantial to me.
And instead of, you know, this substance which is missing, we get Sam's really basic musings on racism. You get things like, "Underneath that skin they are the same. It seemed ridiculous that anyone should care what colour wrapped around it all. She wished she knew how to make things better, except, maybe in some small way, she and Marshall were doing just that. The entire world would see Marshall in a place of honour at a royal wedding. Sam was aware how powerful that kind of imagery could be, maybe even powerful enough to change the national discourse."
I don't know, man. I felt like it really did a disservice to Marshall, the only black character in the book, and made the relationship feel less meaningful, honestly, to me. Which wasn't helped as well by the fact that we got another one of these tell rather than show moments when it's explained that actually Sam only liked Teddy because she couldn't have him and because he was with Beatrice. And she would have been bored of him after second date because he's just way too earnest and not funny or fun enough for her. I was like, what the fuck? I was also really on board with these two in the first book, and you haven't shown me that this is true. You're just telling me.
Like, I felt the first book, Teddy was fun, but he had to temper it all with duty because he wanted to help his family. And like that,
and she knew that.
Yeah. And then now in this book, actually he is all about duty and responsibility, and that's what's sexy about him, not any kind of sense of humor or sense of fun. It's just a personality transplant for convenience sake.
And we should note that it's not like everybody needs to stay together with their first love. And
No.
young people of all ages have change of heart and their feelings change, and that's realistic. But I felt like we should have seen that play out rather than just being told after the fact that, oh, actually, I've come to this realization and you just got to take my word for it.
I felt like so much of this book happened like off screen. Like you would just be jumping into different moments in these characters' stories and then being told what had happened in between, and just you kind of had to just believe it.
I also thought Sam's relationships with her sister and with Nina really suffered because all the focus was on the romance.
Yeah.
And, she actually ends up spending more time with Daphne, I thought, because she enlists her to help with media training, than with Nina, who is supposed to be her best friend.
It's so weird because they could have quite easily killed two birds with one stone. They could have had her spend a lot more time with Nina, and therefore a lot more time with Nina and Marshall, and allowed maybe some of these conversations about, racism attached to the royal family to come out in a more natural way. So I don't know if there just wasn't enough room in this book or what.
Well, let's talk about Nina, who quite randomly ends up getting a very cliched breakup haircut and then spending most of the book with Ethan, who was Jeff's best friend and Daphne's sometime lover.
Yeah.
And I remember we had read the blurb for this book on our previous book club episode, and we were like, where the hell did this come from? How's this going to work? And it doesn't really work, honestly. We have another instance of Catherine McGee clearing up romance from the first book, the Jeff and Nina romance, by removing Jeff almost entirely from the book and just explaining it away as a little girl's love, that Nina had loved him since they were children and her love for him had never really matured. Which at that point I felt was just taking the piss.
I felt as a reader I'd just taken so many beatings at this point from the author. But every relationship that I liked or that I was invested in from the first one, I was basically told I was wrong.
I mean, I don't know how invested I was in this relationship in the first one, but because I'd already had the total knockout of Connor and Beatrice and Sam and Teddy, I was just like, right, okay. Nina's main function, though, it seemed in this book to me, was to remind Sam and the reader of the racist media coverage that she had endured in the first book, as a sort of warning about Marshall signing on for more than he'd bargained for and Sam being a bit naive about it. But I don't know, for all we know, it was a cakewalk for him. We only get him saying, I'd be lying if I said it was smooth sailing the whole time.
Yeah, just don't really go into it. And then the conclusion for her storyline is that she breaks up with Ethan and decides she needs to find herself outside of her identity with the royal family, which she does by agreeing to go on Sam's royal tour.
I know, it's just like putting her again in the position of this royal hanger-on. It doesn't make any sense to me how this links up with her stated desire to find herself.
Made absolutely no sense. Like, I felt like reading it, I was like, this is a contradiction.
And especially because you didn't get the sense that they were really close friends.
Yeah.
And that this was a nice thing for them to do together. I was like, wait, what? But they haven't even really talked to each other in this book.
And it seemed like mainly Nina was going to be there to drive Sam around because Sam doesn't have a driver's license.
Oh, but we should say that the reason that Nina and Ethan were together was because Daphne had asked Ethan, her sometime lover, to distract Nina and keep her away from Jeff.
Yeah.
But that in the end, Ethan ends up legitimately falling in love with Nina. Oh, and just like one weird thing about Ethan is we were wondering, is Ethan meant to be the king's illegitimate son? And is he actually Jeff's half-brother? because we got a really strange and never resolved reference to the relationship between the king and Ethan's mother.
It was Ethan talking about his father. He used a line that was something like, "My father couldn't be in my life." or something that was like really coded, and just immediately my mind went to, he's royal. He's royal.
It was very strange.
And never mentioned again.
Yeah. We should talk about Daphne, though, too.
Yes. She is plotting to get back together with Jeff.
Again,
yeah.
Like in book 1.
And she eventually does that, and along the way she realises that it's not what she wants, which is again something that she knew in book 1.
Again, she comes under pressure from her parents. Again, she is torn between Ethan and Jeff. Again, she is agonising over the aftermath of drugging her friend Himari, who ended up in a coma. Though in this book, she does wake up, and that plot
was so unsatisfying.
Oh my god, the resolution of it was so rushed.
Yeah.
It pissed me off.
It just seemed so lazy. Like, it seemed so clear to me what should happen with this plot when we started it. I was like, okay, so Himari knows what Daphne did, and she wants to try and trap her into lying about it or trying to cover it up so that she can then have her revenge. Because we'd heard all this stuff about how Himari was like an expert at exacting revenge. And then it turns out, no, she genuinely had forgotten. She genuinely did want to be friends again with Daphne. And then she had like a really cliched, I remember everything moment where she goes into the pool house of her parents' house and remembers seeing Daphne and Ethan having sex.
Daphne ends up blackmailing Beatrice, which was a real jump the shark moment for me. And Beatrice then agrees to send Himari's family off to be diplomats abroad, basically out of Daphne's way. Yeah. And then Daphne's like, oh, Himari and I really were true friends. And then Himari's never seen or heard of again. But, like, I don't know. This Daphne wasn't my favourite perspective. Like, I don't know if I had a favourite to read in this book. At the end, I was so annoyed with all of them. But I did think her story was mainly interesting for showing how social climbing can work, and that she does get the proposal and she will be a princess. But mostly I was annoyed that she never really has to reckon with her past behaviour, that she never gets found out, and she never has the big showdown with her parents that we had wanted.
I mean, even Himari, who remembers everything that happened, isn't that angry with her and has decided not to get any revenge on Daphne and is like surprised at being sent away and is like, well, I suppose it'll be nice, thanks, bye. Everything just works out for her, and her punishment, I guess, is that she's like sad about it.
Inner turmoil.
Yeah.
Yes. One thing I thought was interesting Easter egg wise was that Daphne's mother, who we had talked about in the first book, seemed to be modelled on Carol Middleton, or the worst tabloid stereotypes of Carol Middleton. In this book, we find out that she had, before marrying, had worked as a lingerie model and was known as Becky Sharp, which is also the name of the protagonist of Vanity Fair.
And she's a like famous social climber who ends up styling herself as Rebecca Lady Crawley. So you could kind of map it pretty well with this.
Onto the other Easter eggs, though. I was surprised by all the references to the real-life British royals. I don't think we got any of them in the first book.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot more subtle if they were in there in the first one. But with this, we get... Now, they are only referred to by their titles rather than their names. But we have Will essentially challenging Marshall to a swim race and beating him because he's more aerodynamic because he's bald, according to Sam. And Harry, as the spare, had taken the fall for this little competition.
Kate is also in it. She goes to the royal wedding at the end where she's pregnant with her 4th child.
And she's described as looking coolly chic.
There's also a bit that seems to reference Princess Diana when Beatrice recalls how we ate at McDonald's once a year. Our press people alerted the tabloids ahead of time, and they always use them in the section royals. They're just like us. Which is funny. Oh, and then another thing I thought was like the Royal Potomac races seem to be like the American version of Ascot, because they have like quite a similar dress code.
Yeah.
Although Catherine McGee notes that they are utterly American and brash.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, and another thing I thought was strange is that Disney princesses exist in this book.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, would that really be the case? Like, we don't have any cartoon princesses as part of the lore in the UK because we have the real life royals here.
It did seem odd that it would be such a big institution in a country that has its own monarchy.
Yeah. Well, let's just move on to our quote of the week, which we are going to be drawing from Majesty again. So the one that stood out to me was, the symbolic aspects of her job were still the most crucial ones. America needed these moments of pure and uncomplicated joy, something outside the ugliness of political rivalries, to bring the nation together when so many things conspire to tear it apart. I'm wondering, like, is this the function of monarchy? Like, is it pure symbolism?
It's certainly something that we've heard a lot here in the UK during the pandemic, that the Queen has been this symbol of unity and doing her speeches and things like a figurehead for the nation. But I was just not really sure what Beatrice's non-symbolic duties were after this, reading this book. I also thought it was a bit weird talking about like pure and uncomplicated joy in relation to the monarchy.
Yeah, like I'm sure it's a moment of pure and uncomplicated joy when you're like a privileged white person who doesn't have to think about the myriad crimes in the monarchy's history. But it struck me that there was, like I was saying, so much talk about love for the monarchy. Like there's this moment where Beatrice remembers her father telling her on the balcony during a flyover, they're cheering for you because they love you. And at the wedding, this was a crowd of people who'd been drawn together out of something positive, not animosity or anger, but love for the country and what it stood for and for her. Just all this talk of love that seemed so touchy-feely, and I wouldn't say it's a feeling of love. Like over here, I would say it's deference or respect or admiration, but love, just no.
Yeah, it struck me as what the royals probably tell themselves.
Yeah,
rather than
I can definitely imagine a king telling himself, like, they're cheering for me because they love me.
Yeah.
Maybe that is what Charles tells himself. Who knows? But one other quote as well that I want to point out was when Daphne tells Sam, the monarchy is all about pretending. When the world feels like it's falling apart, your family is supposed to paper over the cracks and reassure people that it isn't. And that sounded very similar to me from what Helena Bonham Carter's Princess Margaret tells Olivia Colman's Queen in season 3 of The Crown.
Yeah.
Right at the end.
There's a thing about the monarchy. We paper over the cracks.
Speaking about things that are similar, let's talk about Fit for a Queen.
I thought we could zero in on the royal wedding outfits, particularly Beatrice's wedding dress, which is designed by Wendy Tu, who is obviously fake Vera Wang in this book. They say she's the most famous bridal designer in America, but it's described as having long sleeves with a narrow v-neck and dropped waist that disguise the Queen's small chest, plus an enormous full skirt, and that the ivory silk of the skirt is embroidered with a flower for every state.
So a mashup of Meghan's veil with all the Commonwealth flowers and the California poppy with Kate's v-neck.
I also felt like Sam's dress at the wedding, the ivory dress with the 60 buttons down the back, seemed to be drawing on Pippa Middleton's bridesmaid dress at Kate and Will's wedding.
Big time, yeah.
Otherwise, though, I felt like the fashion moments in this book weren't that interesting. Like, there were some, like, cute moments, like when Sam wore the orange Skittle dress. And there was that whole day where, like, you had to wear orange or else you'd have to buy everyone orange Jell-O shots on your street or something like that. That was fun. But otherwise, I felt like the fashion wasn't as much of a part of this one.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like, apart from, the orange and then the wedding, I didn't really have anything that stood out to me.
Yeah.
What about First in Line?
This was tricky for me to think, because after I read the first one, There were so many characters I really liked. I was so invested in the Beatrice and Connor relationship. I was very into Sam and Teddy.
Yeah.
You know, I liked Nina. I liked parts of Daphne's story. But after reading this one, I didn't really like anyone at all.
Yeah, I felt let down by all of the point of view characters. And I don't really like when we get to a first in line, especially in this instance where, like, I'm not going to go with any of them. I think I have to go with Teddy because he did manage to convince me that duty can be sexy.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I know.
We're in real dire straits here.
Yeah, I ended up being pretty on board with the relationship between him and Beatrice, even though I do understand that it's only by forcibly removing Connor from the equation that he was able to shine.
I think you accepted that better than I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just felt really disappointed with this book.
Yeah, I mean, the characters didn't behave in a way that I could believe in the romance storylines, in the kind of professional development storylines, in any way, really. So I felt quite patronised as a reader.
And also, like, I understand this is a YA book and it's not really meant for, like, anti-monarchist, like, skeptic podcasters to read and enjoy. But I just felt like there was so much missing in regards to the infrastructure of the monarchy and what it means to American people, to like the American public outside of the royal family. So there was a lot that I just felt like needed to be filled in, and I had hoped that it was going to be a 3-book series, but I don't think I would even read a 3rd book at this stage.
I certainly wouldn't if we didn't have this podcast. And I could see myself maybe reading a 3rd one if it did come out, just to see if, you know, I do believe that Catherine McGee is interested in the world of the American monarchy. And I think that's what part of my disappointment was. I felt like there was such promise in the first one, and I felt like she had some really interesting ideas on what an American monarchy would look like. So I think from that perspective, I might see if a 3rd one picks up on that and if she's able to explore it more, but it seems like she's being pushed in a direction that isn't as interesting to me.
There's also no news at all about there being a 3rd one, so at the moment it's just these 2. Although I would say that I did feel so disappointed in this one that I was like, okay, I'm going to read that other book that she wrote, the 1000th Floor series, because we had bought it after reading the first one, and I'm reading that now, and it's so addictive and really good, very soapy and juicy and very futuristic. But it's kind of reminded me that I really do enjoy her writing and her world building and her characters and stuff. It was just for some reason this one just didn't work for me. But we are going to be doing another book club next month on Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, which we've talked about many times on the podcast, and a few of you have asked us to do a book club episode, and we're only too happy to.
Yeah, spoiler alert, we love it.
Yeah, and I read it just as a romance when it came out, but I think it'd be interesting to look at it from its depiction of monarchy.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
sure. So we will be doing that in a few weeks. We'll come up with a date next week probably. But otherwise, next week there is going to be a very exciting appearance from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle on American TV. I think it's on ABC. They're doing a appearance on the Time 100, like the People of the Year special that's going to be televised this year for the first time. And Harry and Meghan are going to be showing up in that on Tuesday, so I'm very interested in what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we may see the Cambridges out again. We might have to wait until like
Another
Harry and
family
Meghan's engagement announcement anniversary comes around or something like that. Oh, no, I'm only kidding. But whatever happens, we'll be talking about it next week, so we would love if you came back and joined us then. And in the meantime, have a great week. And thank you so much for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Would you like to eat my bagel now, too?
Oh, thank you.
I'm so sorry.